All right, everybody, welcome back to the Steel City Blitz Steelers Podcast. And I know it's been a couple weeks since we've visited, and my apologies for that. It's a bit of the dead season right now, but combine stuff, CBA stuff, Bud Dupree, all this kind of stuff. There's plenty of items to discuss now, and joining me are the usual partners in crime, Ian and Ben. And Ian, how are things there in the greater Pittsburgh area this evening?
They are wonderful. We're doing great, and it's a little bit of the dead season for NFL stuff, but I've been writing about college basketball stuff with a lot more to come, so stay tuned to SteelCityBlitz.com for bracketology predictions and conference tournament previews and all that as we head towards the NCAA tournament. I'll have plenty more coming as well.
Just amazing that we are at that point of the year already, into the third month already of 2020, and college basketball, and I know there's conference tournaments underway already, and so check out the bracketology page there at SteelCityBlitz.com. And joining us on the left side of the country is Ben. And Ben, how are you this fine evening?
I'm good. I'm really good. Thanks.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it's good. Getting some spring feelings around here in these parts. Actually supposed to be sunny and near 60 this weekend, so I'm very, very excited about that. I do enjoy some sunshine and temperatures where I don't freeze. The collective bargaining agreement proposal is now gone to a vote, gentlemen, and we were talking before we started recording and stuff here, and it's really fascinating the number of people who think this will pass, the number of people who don't think this will pass, and there's bazillions of ramifications if it goes one way, and another bazillion if it goes another way here. But the players have 7 days with which to cast their vote, and then at the end of that period, then the votes are tabulated. It's a simple majority, and that's the way it's going to go. So, Ben, you've kind of followed this thing pretty closely here. Your gut feeling is you don't think this is going to pass. Why do you feel that way?
Well, I don't have a real strong feeling one way or the other, to be honest with you. Based upon the people, it looks to me, I should preface all of this with, it looks to me like, it looked to me initially anyway, like it was a pretty fair deal for the players this time because they're getting more money in exchange for a 17th game. They're getting more time off in the preseason. They're getting a few more things that they wanted. And then they're getting rid of marijuana testing basically almost entirely. So that was another thing they really, really wanted. But there are some negative ramifications, that were brought out. One in particular, any player that's out even 1 day and has more than 5 accrued seasons loses that accrued season for 1 day holdout. And now all fines for holdouts are mandatory. They cannot be forgiven by the team at all under any circumstances. So basically they're going after holdouts and saying, yeah, if you're under contract, you can't hold out, period. And if you do, these are the ramifications, and you're going to pay the fines, and the fines, they're going to, I guess they're raising the fines. They were fining guys before $30,000 a day. Now they can fine them more than that if this thing goes through. Fines are mandatory. Lose a year of vesting,
that's huge.
Medical benefits, toward your pension, toward all of that. Nobody's going to, they're not going to take that lightly. It's taken too long between when the initial summary sheet went out to the membership and when they finalized the document, and now they're finally going to vote on it. I guess they're going to begin voting on it tomorrow. It's taken too long, and too much negativity has come out, and now it's not going to pass. And there are a number of guys, prominent players. One of them, Marquise Pouncey, who came out right away and said, "I'm not in favor of this." Now, my understanding is that D. Smith is very much in favor of it.
The NFLPA president.
Director,
executive director.
Exactly. He's looking at it pragmatically. I get it. Basically, what he wants to do is present a unified front NFLPA and NFL to the television networks to try and get as big a contract as they possibly can before an election year recession, because historically there have been recessions after elections and or around elections, and we're due for one. We've had 10 years of economic growth, economic expansion, and we're due for a recession on top of the fact that we've also got this virus hitting us.
Yeah.
So there's a possibility that could happen, and they're trying to get the TV contracts done in advance of that. So really, he's protecting his membership by doing so, because the more money the NFL makes, the bigger piece of pie. If the pie is bigger, the bigger that piece is that the NFLPA membership gets. So he is looking out for them. But there are all these things hanging out there that a lot of the guys really object to. So I don't know. Flip a coin, man. My understanding is that, it's going to be close, but it's not going to pass. But it's all speculation right now. I don't think anybody really knows for sure, to be perfectly frank.
Well, I think that's where everybody is, and the rank and file guys versus the guys that are guaranteed to make pretty big money, and there's a lot of these different conversations that are being had out there, and I agree with you. I don't know where this is going to come out. It's very much like politics and political elections these days. You think you've got a finger on the pulse of it, and then it just goes in a completely different direction. So, Ian, if this does not pass, then what are we looking at in the near future here, as far as what comes this season and then after the season?
Right. So just one thing to add on to what Ben said.
Yeah.
From what I can tell, it seems like this is actually a pretty good deal for players who are making under like $1.5 to $2 million. That seems to kind of be about the cutoff, right? Players that are on the minimum salary and just above that type contracts, they did a lot to kind of address entry-level contracts, minimum salary contracts, those kind of things. And actually, it seems like a pretty good deal for retired players as well, that they expanded some benefits for retired players, but those guys don't get a vote. It's only the active players that get a vote. So, the guys who are on the bigger contracts, like Ben mentioned, the vested veterans essentially that are on contracts of essentially more than $2 million, are the ones that it's either revenue neutral for or not as good as, the percentage increases that the other guys are seeing. And they kind of have to, figure out, okay, well, if we're not going to make that money up in base salary, what else are we going to be able to, how else can we make that money up, or what other benefits can we get with like the extra time off, the reduced practice time, all that. And when, the economics are that close, adding in a 17th game and an extra playoff team, which adds another playoff game for another team, really don't help things get through. If the economics were better, I think it would, for the guys who make more money, and those are the more visible guys, especially on social media and interviews, because those are the stars of the league. And if the deal was better for the stars of the league, they'd probably be coming out more in favor of it. But it's a total membership vote too, and you need more than half of the total membership, and there's more guys making less money than there are the guys that are making a ton of money. So I agree with Ben. It's probably going to be close, but I don't think it gets approved. So to answer your question, where do we go from here? There's still 1 year left in the current collective bargaining agreement, and things can just operate on the status quo. 16 game schedule. 6 teams make the playoffs from both conferences. The salary cap will be probably around $200 million, which they've already projected, and just kind of roll forward with that last year. The key points and things we've talked about before is the 30% rule would stay in place. That for any new contracts signed that extend beyond the end of this CBA, that they can't have escalators more than 30% in a given year. So, for guys like Bud Dupree or other free agents, that either is going to have to give them a higher number at the beginning of their contract, or it's going to lessen the total value of their contracts over time, given, the position of some of these guys in the market and the fact that the salary cap's increasing by $10 million and there's going to be, or 12 million, actually, it was like 188.8 last year. So I guess that's 11 million. Same idea. That there's plenty of teams out there with lots of cap space that are going to be willing to throw money at people and basically do what the Jacksonville Jaguars have done. Right? They threw a bunch of money at a bunch of people, and now they're just having a fire sale and cutting everyone, so that they don't actually have to pay out the full value of the contract, which has been a big sticking point for players with. The current CBA is that the guaranteed money is really what matters. The total value of the contract is meaningless because, unlike the Steelers, 31 other teams don't really value the total contract as a whole. The Steelers have a very good track record of paying out a large portion of players' contracts. I mean, we've talked about it before. Players like Mike Mitchell and other guys that they've kept around a year too long, or in Mike Mitchell's case, he should have been cut after year one. But guys they've kept around because they made commitments to them, and that that does help them when they go out to sign free agents, because generally they don't have a lot of cap space. But players also know, hey, if I sign a contract with this team, they're probably going to pay me the majority of the deal. They're not going to cut me as soon as the guaranteed money runs out.
So let's go ahead and assume the worst and that this doesn't pass. We know that Art Rooney, too. We know that Kevin Colbert, Mike Tomlin, they have all said that keeping Bud Dupree is a priority. The three of us are kind of like scratching our heads because if things stay the way they are, we just don't see it. So, I mean, Ben, what's the impact on Bud Dupree if this thing does not pass and we go in with this final year of the agreement? Is there any way, short of getting rid of perhaps some guys that we don't see it happening to, that Bud Dupree stays on the team? How does this work?
You can cut Barron, Foster, Chickalo, and Vance McDonald, and you can create enough space, and you can. But then you can't tender the majority of your restricted free agents.
Right.
You have to try and sign them before free agency hits or lose them. You can kiss BJ Finney goodbye. He's gone. Basically, you can't have both. You can't have your cake and eat it too here. If you want to keep Dupree around, you can't keep McDonald, who I think you need. You can't keep BJ Finney. You can't keep a number of other essential pieces. Tyler Matakevich, Matt Filer. These are guys you really need to bring back.
Yeah.
Even Chickalo, who I don't care. He's not worth $5 million by any stretch, but he was a very productive special teams player last year. So you've got to replace that talent from someplace, and you can't just say, "Oh, well, no problem. We'll just throw Skipper and Ola in there," and you can try that, but they're not proven guys.
It's not that easy.
They're not. And don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely in favor of cutting Chickalo, but with a plan in place. That's all I am saying. Don't just cut guys willy-nilly because they suck and it's easy to put special teamers in place, because it's not. It is not easy to plug and play special teamers. Oh. And the Steelers have tried that number of years, and that's why our special teams suck. Well, that and Danny Smith. But I digress. Yeah. There are going to be a lot of tough choices if the CBA is not ratified. If it is, basically, it's like the Red Sea parting. I mean, there are all kinds of avenues to create space and take advantage of having that franchise quarterback for a couple more years and having, I don't want to call it an elite defense yet, but having a very good defense that's also very young, very good, very young, on the rise. Having that defense in place and taking advantage of those two things is someplace you really, really want to be. So I understand them wanting to keep Dupree and keep that defense intact. But absent a new CBA, you have to make some really, really tough choices to do so.
So Ian, let me ask
the other thing I'll add in too is the 30% rule not only would affect signing a guy like Bud Dupree this year, but it would also affect potentially sort of your long-term contract negotiations too. That traditionally the Steelers have tried to sign guys to extensions when they were entering the last year of their contract. So a big guy with the big numbers, Cam Hayward, he's set to make $9.5 million base salary, have a $13 million cap hit this year as he enters the last year of his contract. And traditionally that would be a time the Steelers would be able to renegotiate that contract and save a little bit of money against the cap. But with the 30% rule in place, that gets increasingly difficult, that they won't really be able to do that, or even if they do, they won't be able to spread out the money as much as they traditionally have been able to. So it's not just the guys who are set to be free agents, but also the guys on the roster. It really limits their ability to restructure or renegotiate their existing contracts. And there's, in the final year of the cap, there's no such thing as a June 1st cut. Right.
Well,
right.
Right.
Extend them. Yes, that's correct. And there's also no such thing as a June 1st cut anymore. So you can't even, cut a guy and designate him as a June 1st cut to split the salary cap burden over 2 seasons, because you can't do that in the final year of a CBA. So things get really tight if this doesn't get done. And I think it'll probably get done. I'm not thinking that there's going to be a lockout, because there's too much money at stake for there to be a lockout. But I think a deal will get done eventually. I just don't think it'll get done now in time for free agency to start, which, could hamstring us a little bit this season as far as what we're able to do. The other option I've kind of been bouncing around my head a little bit is if they just slap the franchise tag on Dupree. Maybe they use the non-exclusive tag to let another team negotiate with him and have to give up a draft pick if they want to sign him, or they tag him and then try and trade him off of that, just to give themselves some more wiggle room and maybe some more time to potentially let a CBA get done. But I don't know what the likelihood of that is, just because of the tightness of the salary cap window and what they'd have to do just to get under the cap to franchise Dupree. One other thing I'll note on Dupree's franchise tag potentially is to keep an eye on what happens in Tampa with Shaq Barrett, because the talk is that Tampa is going to franchise Shaq Barrett. And there's some dispute over whether Barrett's tag number should be a defensive end number or a linebacker's number. And there's some significant differences there in what the cost of those would be. So whatever happens with Barrett may trickle down to Dupree, although I think Tampa played a little bit more of a 4-3 than a 3-4. I'm not sure. I didn't really watch many of the Buccaneers games last year, but but it's still worth watching, kind of how those edge rushers get defined moving forward.
No, and to your point about Dupree, a potential tag and trade type thing, that's, if I'm not mistaken, that's essentially what the Texans did with Clowney. Yeah, I'm not saying that's going to happen.
They're not going to do that.
But just in terms of the types of things that can be done, I don't know. I mean, I'm curious. I mean, because if this doesn't get passed, and because of the amount of money, but what it would ultimately mean is that those top tier players had enough sway over everybody else to get the no vote, but then they're going to have to give something up in order to get what they want, which, Ben, you talked about that the new policy regarding holdouts, the heavy penalties, fines, the loss of the accrued season type stuff, which to me is something that they're probably going to really be going after. So, but what would they give up? I mean, are they willing to go back to marijuana testing again? Because I don't think they want that.
I don't know, man. But
you see what I'm saying?
What it comes down to is money. Yeah, no, I get it. And basically, I mean, it's the thing that. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Getting back to your point about Bud Dupree, though, if they tag him, the Steelers are stubborn about this negotiating in good faith, that and having a reputation for doing so. They're so stubborn about it that if they tag someone, they always do so with the intention of signing that guy to a long-term deal. How many people, including all of us, screamed, trade Le'Veon Bell's rights. Trade him. They never even attempted to. Never even attempted to do it. And it was very clear early on that they were not going to get a long-term deal done. And then he just didn't play. He just held out for a year and was willing to come back. Week 9, would have come back in the 10th week and gotten that accrued season. If they would guarantee him that they would not tag him again, and they wouldn't do that either. And it was just about the fact that they would not give up their collectively bargained rights. Mm-hmm. And they will not tag a player without intending to sign him to a long-term deal. So they're not going to tag Dupree and then trade him away. It just isn't going to happen. It's a pipe dream. And I want to make that clear. It's real fun to talk about on Twitter, but it isn't going to happen. It's just not. And I know it bothers me sometimes too that they're so damn stubborn, but they are. So let's not entertain this as a serious possibility, because it isn't.
Yeah.
As far as the CBA goes, what they're going to have to give back, I don't know. If they don't get it signed, my understanding is the owners have already told them this is as good an offer as you're going to get. This is it right here. Mm-hmm. If we get a big enough television contract, we'll give you 48.5%. Big enough television pie. We'll give you 48.5%. You'll get 48% right out of the gate. We'll give you another half a point if we get enough money out of the networks. And that's one of the reasons that D. Smith wants to get it done now. It's not just a bigger pie because the circumstances are better right now. It's also a bigger piece of the pie if they get a bigger pie.
And it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
they're trying to entice them to move forward and get it done. But I don't know. We'll see. I hope they agree, but I don't know. And if they don't, I'm not going to begrudge them. It's their finances. It's their financial decision. It's not mine. Nobody tells you how to negotiate for your job as a salesman. Don't tell them how to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's an incredibly important point. And we see all too many Twitter GMs, telling these guys, "You're getting a great deal. Look how much you're paid. You're complaining about having to wear pads too often and be at practice too often." And walk a mile in somebody else's shoes before you start criticizing them. That would be my piece of advice.
That man, it's not just.
Well,
it's not just that. They want to make comparisons about how the owners have an investment, took the risk, and the owners, you know what, man? You don't think that working as an athlete your entire life to get to this position is an investment? Are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. And the owners, a lot of the owners inherited their teams or inherited their money. And the thing that people really, really don't understand is this. Between what the owners take home and their investment equity increases, the value of their team increasing, all these owners make over $100 million a year. Some of them make over $150 million a year.
Yeah, they're doing all right.
Okay. They're doing fine. The owners can absolutely withstand a lockout.
Yeah.
The players, not so much.
Yeah, and I would love to think that, Marquise Pouncey saying, "Hey, we'll take care of you," when he talks to the guys that are at the bottom end of the scale, but I don't know how long that would be possible. I think it's extremely noble on his part, but I just hope it gets done as a fan. But like you said, Ben, I'm not going to hold any grudges against the guys if it doesn't, because it's their world, not mine in that regard. Ian, did you have any final thoughts on CBA, Bud Dupree, any of that stuff before we move down?
The real thought I have on Bud Dupree is, if he's not back, what do they do there? Because like we talked about, just to get enough cap space to kind of sign their own guys, tender their restricted free agents, and have enough to sign their draft picks, like they're going to have to cut a couple guys. And Chicolo has a huge salary number at $4.5 million. They'd save $5 million because there's a roster bonus in there too. They'd save $5 million against the cap with a cut and only have like a little over $1 million in dead money. I mean, that's an easy cut for a guy that's not very productive. And if Dupree walks too, what's your solution opposite TJ Watt? I mean, they're going to have to bring somebody in, probably a low-cost veteran or someone on kind of a 1-year prove-it deal. And obviously, we don't have a first-round pick either. So, you're not really going to have much in terms of options to fill that void on the that side of the defense. Well, I shouldn't even say that side. They move around, but fill that starting position.
What do we have right now? About 10 days that the Steelers have left to put the tag on him?
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Yeah, something in that neighborhood. And again, I think a lot of people are getting all, well, geez, they haven't tagged him yet. Well, give them time. They're waiting this thing out.
They'll probably. I'd imagine
Nobody's
they'll wait until the last day. Yeah.
No, somebody.
The entire league.
Well, yeah, I mean, there have been teams that have said they have plans to tag certain guys, but yeah, I don't think nobody's officially been tagged, so I don't think it's a huge thing. But it is interesting. I looked at a number of mock drafts this past couple of days, and the amount of the quote unquote pundits, experts, whatever you want to call them, have us taking edge rushers in the second round with the 49th pick. As you alluded to, Ian, we have Minkah Fitzpatrick, which I'm totally fine with as our first round pick.
Yep.
But I obviously I think these guys that make these picks are doing so with the thought in mind that Dupree's not going to be around, and that seems likely as to why they're making those selections. So, it's natural to pay attention to that. But then, when you look across the Steelers roster and you realize that upgrades at tight end are necessary, and you can make arguments for offensive line, defensive line, a safety, another linebacker. I mean, you can make arguments across the board where that's going to go. And there's even people talking about wide receiver, because they've taken wide receivers so many times in that third round area. So I don't know. It's going to be fascinating. I know Ian, you didn't see a ton of the combine. Ben, did you watch any of the combine at all?
A little bit of it, not a lot.
Yeah.
I check the, basically I check the stats, I check the testing, and then if there's somebody I want to watch, I sit there and wait patiently for the next player to run.
Yeah,
I'm not that into it. I mean, looking at the times and evaluating players based upon that. Sure, I do that. Yeah, but sitting there and just zoning out and watching the combine, no, man, no.
I admit that I do it with like the quarterbacks. I do want to. And granted, you don't have a rush. You don't have. I mean, it's just guys throwing balls. But I do like to see who can throw with some zip, who's got some accuracy, and I do like some of that stuff. And I do also, I find it absolutely earth-shattering to see a guy that's 360 pounds run a 5'1" 40. I mean, that's just unbelievable where we've come in the era of big men being able to move so fast. It just truly is incredible. But it's I like to look at that, and then I like to, of course, look and see who the Steelers have met with, and they met with Jalen Reagor, the wide receiver from TCU. They met with Cam Akers, the running back from Florida State. They met with a few edge rush guys, Uche from Michigan, and so the Steelers are doing what they do. They meet with tons of people, and to make it anything more than it's just a meeting would be criminal. Don't take it any further than that. They haven't even started pro days yet. They haven't had visits in yet. So let's not get too far ahead of ourselves in that regard. But as we sit here right now. And let's assume that they keep Dupree, Ian. Where do you think that they're going to go with that first pick of theirs at pick 49?
I'm going to be very vague intentionally and say an offensive skill position. And we've talked about this before when we had our podcast on the offense.
Right.
That, the thing that was really missing last year was someone who could be that home run hitter that could take the ball to the house anytime they touch the ball. Juju showed that a little bit early in the season before his injury. Deontay Johnson did it a couple times, but not with regularity. They really didn't have a tight end that could separate in space and make anything happen after the catch. They didn't have a running back really that was capable of anything longer than a 15-yard gain, which I mean Connor had a couple longer rushes, but then he got injured and it was kind of a running back by committee approach. And even those guys, when they had long runs, weren't consistent about it. So they didn't have those guys that were capable of, turning in a 70 or 80-yard touchdown play. And that's really what's missing. So whether that's a running back, a wide receiver, a tight end, the kid from Dayton looks absolutely outstanding, but I don't think he'll make it to 49. But there's some other good tight ends out there too. So it's really going to be a question of, what their needs are after free agency. They're not going to have a ton of cap space, but they're going to have to address some things. We've talked about before with Vance McDonald. If they cut him, they probably can't sign someone for much less than what Vance is making to be a number one tight end.
Exactly.
The savings you get from Vance McDonald would basically get you Jesse James, and Jesse James is not as good as Vance McDonald. So, nope. You kind of have to keep McDonald around just because of the economics. And it seems like they fully intend on doing that. There were some articles this week that said they intend to keep him. So, overall, I think McDonald's getting paid about like it's the 17th or 18th highest tight end in the league, which is probably about where he should be with his production. Yeah. So that's not really hurting you there. But they still have a need for a number 2 tight end and a number 3 tight end. And that sort of game breaker at either running back or wide receiver, I just hope that they actually draft a running back or wide receiver and don't get enamored with, someone that they think can do everything, right. Dree Archer and Chris Rainey, they can't do anything at all, because those guys they thought could do everything, but they could actually do nothing. And I've said this before on Twitter and I'll say it again, but Tyreek Hill is what they wanted Dree Archer and Chris Rainey to be. And it pains me every time I see it because, I mean, he turned out to be a fantastic football player, his off-field issues notwithstanding.
Right. Ben, are you in a similar boat if they are able to keep Dupree? You think they go some kind of skill position there, or you think it's something else?
Not necessarily. I think it could be lineman. But a tight end, if there's a good tight end available, I think they have to consider it, especially if they cannot manage to re-sign Nick Vannett, because they will need a number 2 tight end. They like Gentry for some reason. I still think he sucks and was a terrible wasted draft pick, but they like him.
Couldn't agree more.
So they're going to try and develop him. It is what it is. They're going to try and develop the guy. They own it. But if they cut McDonald and they can't re-sign Vannett, the only tight end they would have on the roster would be Gentry, and he sucks flat out.
Yeah,
there's
absolutely no way you can enter an NFL season with him as your tight end. It just cannot happen.
Then you have to bring in a tight end, and if it's me, I'm not only drafting one, I'm signing a veteran somehow, even if he's just a low cost guy who can do a few things, but at least he can explain what the coach meant to the young players and kind of get the ball rolling for them. I don't see them taking a running back that early, but I think they will take a running back.
Agreed.
See them taking a wide receiver in the second. I know they've met with some guys, but I don't think Rieger, for example, is getting out of the first round. I just don't see it. You watch his tape and it's like, he's the first round wide receiver. They interview a lot of guys during this process to get to know them as players so that later on they have a point of reference when that guy is a free agent.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And they talk to a lot of players. Yeah. Everyone they talk to doesn't necessarily mean that they're interested. People need to get that through their heads. And we talk about this every single year. And every year there's hype over who they're going to take. And they talk to this guy at the combine. They had him in for a visit and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, they talk to as many players as they possibly can and will continue to do so. Because not only do they like the process, they want to know as much about the incoming pool of players as they possibly can before they make these decisions. And then later on, they have legacy information when that guy becomes a draw on. They can go, hey, these are our notes from when we talked about this guy. Hey, I thought that he had leadership
Mm-hmm.
ability
Mm-hmm.
when we saw him around other players.
And that's part of that reason why you constantly hear about this guy really liked Coach Tomlin. He wants to play for Coach Tomlin when he becomes a free agent, because they did have good rapport, good relationship during the pre-draft process. They just couldn't draft him.
And you even heard that when they traded for Minka too. They talked about how enamored they were with him during the pre-draft process.
Yeah,
they just knew that he wouldn't make it to him.
Right. They just knew he wasn't going to get out of the top 10, and he didn't.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, he went 11th, but yeah.
I could see them going edge, in the second round. If they do tag Dupree, I don't see them signing him to a long-term deal for a number of reasons. I don't think that Dupree will sign the deal they offer him, and I don't see them being able to, and I've talked about this before, being willing to devote $40 million a year to two guys on the defense. Between TJ Watt and Bud Dupree, and that's what it's going to cost. Watt's going to be a $24-25 million a year guy when he finally gets his big deal.
What you've got with Hayward and Tuitt, you got a lot of money in there too.
Yeah, and that's where I was going next. Yeah. I could see them taking an interior defensive lineman in the second round as well.
Yeah,
because they're going to lose Javon Hargrave, and because, frankly, Stephon Tuitt, as talented as he is, can you count on him to stay on the field?
Right.
No, you can't. And I really hope that they do not one more time renegotiate, restructure his contract, even if there is a new CBA, because they need to get themselves in a position where they can part company with Mr. Tuitt, because he hasn't lived up to his contract. And it's not for lack of trying. I'm certainly not saying that. But if you can't, if one of your best abilities is not your availability, what are you really worth? Honestly.
Yeah. And that's that's really the NFL in a nutshell. It's what makes it so unique compared to other NFL or other pro sports. Yeah. We have just a few minutes left here, and Ian, I know you have just completely dove into the NCAA tournament here, and we don't have a lot of time left here, but what are you looking at here as far as your top seeds going into the tournament right now?
Yeah, I think the top line has kind of consolidated itself with Kansas, Baylor, Gonzaga are pretty much locks for the top seed. San Diego State, as long as they win the Mountain West tournament, probably will be a top seed. Dayton's the only other one that could really kind of slide in there. The Flyers have had a fantastic season as well. They're 27-2 right now, or 28-2. They just won last night. Sorry, but it's really the conversation for actually the number one seeds is not all that difficult, but all those teams have some flaws. Teams like Seton Hall are really good. Duke's been up and down this year. Maryland and Kentucky have been up and down this year. Just when you think some of those teams are starting to put it together, Maryland just lost to Rutgers and Kentucky lost at home to Tennessee this week. So both of those teams are kind of hanging around the bubble, Rutgers and Tennessee. So, you never really know what's going to happen in March. Michigan State's starting to play a lot better. Tom Izzo's teams always put it together in March and go on a run. So don't be shocked to see Michigan State show up on, the 3 or 4 seed line, but then probably be there in the Elite Eight too. So the real interesting thing is kind of at the bottom end on the bubble, that the bubble had started to shrink a little bit over the last few weeks. And then this past week, it really expanded again too. That you had some teams that were kind of hovering around 500, like Tennessee, who I just mentioned, and Purdue. That no team since 2001 has gotten an at-large bid 2 games that had a record 2 games above 500. Everyone was 3 games or more above 500 since then. And so really that's always been my cutoff of, when do you consider a team versus not consider a team. So I wasn't even really looking at teams like Tennessee and Purdue for a while there. And then they went on these little winning streaks. Texas is another one, went on a winning streak. And they've won 5 in a row. And
what a win they had last night.
Got themselves back in the conversation as well. So really there's a lot more teams now in consideration, but also teams like UCLA took over the Pac-12 lead, might be the number 1 seed in their tournament. Tulsa came out of nowhere and took over the American Athletic Conference lead. So that could potentially take automatic bids away from a team like Houston or someone else in the Pac-12 that, then that shrinks the number of teams that will actually get into the tournament. So where I am right now, looking at it, you've got like Oklahoma, Providence, Stanford, Xavier, Indiana, UCLA, Florida, East Tennessee State, Northern Iowa, a couple other mid-major teams that could steal a bit if they don't win their tournament, Wichita State, Rutgers, Utah State, Richmond, NC State, Cincinnati, Texas, South Carolina, Mississippi State, Arkansas, St. Louis, Rhode Island, Memphis, Tennessee are really the teams I kind of have on the bubble. But, out of those, 10 or 11 are probably going to make it, and I just named 20 teams. So
real quick, what was your percentage last year on the 64 teams?
I think I got 66 out of 68 last year. The year before, right. I got all 68 right. So
that's right.
Yep. But the two teams I missed last year were both in kind of the top four or the first four out that the committee had. So I was pretty close on them.
So there you have it. If you're an NCAA person, then you need to be reading Ian's stuff at SteelCityBlitz.com. He's kicking it out more and more as the conference tournaments get underway, and Selection Sunday coming up very, very soon. And, of course, the NFL 2020 season officially kicks off on March 18th. And let's all hope that that's the day Tom Brady makes a damn decision, because I'm really getting sick and tired of hearing about it. Anyway, we're going to get out of here. Thanks for listening. As always, make sure you take a moment and give us a rating or review on whatever platform you listen to. And for Ian and Ben, this is Steel Dad, and we're signing off on the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast. Have a good one, everybody, and go Steelers.
Ravens suck.